Good morning, and welcome to the Excellence in Education Summit. My name is Christy Hovanitz. I'm a Senior Policy Fellow at the Foundation, specifically around accountability policy. Thank you so much for attending our measurement session this morning. We have 4 fantastic panelists and Cornelia Orr as our moderator today. A couple announcements before we get. This is a great start. Couple announcements before we get started. Michael Horn will be doing a book signing at 11 a.m. right outside in the expo area. And then also, all of the sessions that we're doing today, we're working on taking a deeper dive by doing some ed policy leaders online. So we're actually putting together some courses that will be online and launching those throughout the year on these particular topics with a lot of the speakers that you're going to see today. So check back on our website. Also, all of our sessions are being video recorded. The general sessions are live streamed. So all this information will be on our website. Today I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Cornelia Orr. She is the Executive Director of the National Assessment Governing Board, which oversees NAEP development and policy. Her and Dr. Holliday will be heading towards the governing board meeting later, so we appreciate them making time to be here today and participating in this panel with us. We will have our presenters each give about a 10-minute talk about what's happening in their states with respect to assessments, standards, and transitions. And then we will open it up at the end for questions. So, Dr. Orr.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to stand here, and the speakers will probably just talk from where they are today. As Christy said, I'm the staff director for the National Assessment Governing Board, but what she didn't say, thankfully, was that I've been working in the education sector and ed policy, assessment policy specifically, for much longer than I like to think about. It's quite some years there. But today I'm privileged to introduce you to this distinguished panel and set the context for our conversation. These presenters are really on the front line of educational reform in their individual states. They each have a different perspective, and I'm sure they could tell you some more stories. I think what's going to be great for you today is the ideas you may glean from what they tell you about how they have been implementing reform in their states. So I hope you'll be listening carefully. I'm going to give you just a little background on each speaker and then make my remarks, and then I'll go to Terry Holliday, who will be the first speaker. So Dr. Holliday was selected as Kentucky's 5th Commissioner of Education back in July of 2009. That was about 5 years ago, I think. He served as superintendent of the Iredell Statesville, is that how you say it, Terry? Iredell Statesville School District in North Carolina. Under his leadership there, the district received the 2008 Malcolm Baldrige Award, and he is now serving, as you heard, on the National Assessment Governing Board and on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Overseers. In December of 2010, Dr. Holliday was named to the Board of Directors of the Council of Chief State School Officers, and he has just finished his term as president of that organization. He is the co-author of a book, Running All the Red Lights, A Journey of System-Wide Educational Reform. So you might want to pick that up and see what red lights you can run. Our next speaker will be Tom Luna. Tom is serving in his 2nd term as Idaho Superintendent of Public Instruction, and he has been working to ensure every student graduates from high school prepared to go on to post-secondary education or the workforce without the need of remediation that you heard Governor Bush speak about earlier. Superintendent Luna has worked closely with Idaho's governor to reform the education system to accomplish this goal. He has served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers and has just finished his term on the National Assessment Governing Board, so he doesn't have to go over to the meeting today. Pam Stewart, next to him, is here from Florida. She brings a broad range of educational experience to her role as Commissioner of the Florida Department of Education. She's been a teacher, a guidance counselor, a testing specialist, and principal at both the elementary and high school levels. She came to the Department of Education in 2004 as Deputy Chancellor of Educational Quality, and from there she left and went back to St. Johns County Public Schools to become the Deputy Superintendent in 2009. After a term there, she returned to the Department of Education as the the Chancellor of Public Schools there, and eventually was appointed to the Commissioner role. Our final speaker today will be Dr. Carey Wright. She is the State Superintendent of Education in Mississippi. She previously served as Chief Academic Officer and Deputy Chief of the Office of Teaching and Learning for the District of Columbia Schools, and as Associate Superintendent for the Office of Special Education and Student Services for Montgomery County Schools in Maryland. She is also a former teacher and principal. She's been recognized as an outstanding educator by the National Center for Culturally Responsive Systems, nominated twice for the Washington Post Outstanding Principal Award and the Howard County Chamber of Commerce Outstanding Education of the Year. She was given that award. So before the speakers start sharing their individual experiences, I wanted to just frame a little bit of the context for this important discussion. In my day job at the National Assessment Governing Board, we set policy for the nation's report card, or NAEP. As Christy mentioned, we're responsible for identifying what to test, what subjects to test, releasing the results, and also, I think one of the most important things we do is establish the performance levels on NAEP. In NAEP world, they're called basic, proficient, and advanced. It's important for all of you to remember that 25 years ago, when the governing board started doing this, many people were opposed to having these types of content-linked performance standards. It's hard in today's world to remember that people actually opposed those. In that day, we were quite comfortable reporting test scores in relation to a reference group. You probably all remember your percentile rank. Don't you? I thought you did. That told us how you were achieving in relation to some group. It didn't even come close to telling us what you knew, or even if you knew enough. So I think that that's just reflecting back on that history. 25 years isn't that long. I've got a child that's 40. 25 years flies by like that. So we do forget that that's the world we were in. The governing board, however, believed that identifying what students should know and be able to do was critical to communicating clearly to the public and to policymakers. Now this practice of standards-based reporting is commonplace across the United States. Over the last 10 years, the governing board has been doing a good bit of research to try to add meaning to what those standards are: basic, proficient, advanced. We've been linking to international assessments. We've been doing some 12th grade preparedness research on NAEP. And I'm not here to report on the findings of that research, but I'm here to tell you that it's very promising. What were received very poorly back in the day, basic, advanced, and proficient, are aligning very well with the international assessments and also with college entrance exams. You can ask me more about that later if you'd like to know. So, I mention all this history because across the country, states are adopting more rigorous standards. So standards-based reform has been with us a while, but in the last 5 years, we've really seen a movement to make more internationally benchmarked rigorous standards. College and career ready. And what's very, I think, good news is that teachers are beginning to teach to these more rigorous standards, and that's a really good thing because student achievement can't change without better instruction to the more rigorous standards. And it's all wonderful that's going on. We just can't stop there. There are other important aspects of this, and I think these speakers will all touch on this. But we must develop assessments that match the rigor of the standards. You know, teachers and students will know if you're lowballing. They will know if you're giving them an easy test. So the assessments have to be aligned with the rigor of the test. They also have to be aligned with the instructional goals. If you're testing something that's not a goal of the instruction in the classroom, that's not going to be good enough, and teachers will quickly realize it, and they'll begin to teach the test. So if you're misaligned and you wonder why aren't teachers teaching to the standards, it's because they're teaching to the test. You've got to get that alignment together. You also have to set rigorous performance expectations for students. Now, there's this balance, I think, between how you use those performance expectations in an accountability system, but you must be clear in what you say to students. This is how much you should know. and here's where you stand in relation to how much you should know. So I think the use of these assessment results in a way that promotes achievement and improvement for all students in all schools is very important. So whatever you do to use assessment results, I would encourage that to be the case. Now, I hope we can turn and learn more from these 4 states who've been successfully implementing reform. Terry.
Thank you, Cornelia. It's an honor to be here today, and very moved by the young lady Tanisha's presentation and the remarks of Governor Bush. If we look in Kentucky, we've got a little bit of a historic record for education reform, and it was so important in this most recent education reform work that leadership was taken by our General Assembly and Governor. They passed reform legislation in 2009, unanimous. That doesn't happen too often in places across this nation. And that new legislation required new standards, new assessment, new accountability, professional support for teachers, and a balanced system, not just summative testing in math and reading, but a real balanced system to make sure that we were focused on the arts and health and PE and those types of things, which are constitutionally required in Kentucky. The other good thing about General Assembly and the governor being common in support of this reform agenda is they get all the credit when it goes well, and I get all the blame when it goes wrong. So we know how that goes. Interesting times, as with every other state. We were one of the early runners on the adoption of the Common Core State Standards, which we immediately changed to the Kentucky Core Academic Standards. And it was so critical that teacher ownership of those standards happened in Kentucky. We convened thousands of teachers throughout the 2010-11 school year to translate those standards into assessment procedures. We used Rick Stiggins' framework to do that, and we said, what does it mean for students? How do you determine if a student is mastering this standard? And teachers need a lot of support and resources to transition to the new standards. Critical to this was the assessments. What we did is 10-11 was the year that we worked with all of our teachers. We continued our old legacy assessment in 10-11, but we quickly changed in 2011-12 to a new assessment, Common Core assessment. So we're the only state that has 3 years of assessment data tied to the Common Core State Standards, which are the Kentucky Core Academic Standards. Just a critical piece about setting levels. What we did, we brought teachers in, they helped us develop the assessments, the items. And now they were certainly vetted, and they certainly had all the psychometricians and all the support that they needed. And then the teachers helped us determine, where the levels would be. And they helped us with the framework, very similar to what NAEP does, is if a student's novice, what would it take for them to move to apprentice, in student performance? So teachers and parents could really understand your child can do this here, but to get to the next level, they need to be able to do this. To get to distinguish, they need to be able to do this. I think what helped us most in the very early work was we set the cut points. That's the most difficult thing. Smart Balance just has done something like that, and Park will be doing that. Every assessment has to do that. Where are those cut points? And we made those cut points based on what kids could actually do. But we also had the psychometricians working with us. We are a ACT state, but we also have tremendous performance in advanced placement with increases in minority kids. But every junior takes the ACT, every 10th grader takes the plan, every 8th grader took the Explore. So we took 8th grade NAEP, we took 8th grade Explore results, and we back mapped that level of performance tied to our standards all the way back to third grade. So beginning in third grade, mom and dad know, is my child on a trajectory to reach college and career readiness levels? So reading and math, you know, in third grade, I'm not where I need to be. So I need to pump this up. I need a little extra help. I need extra services. I need intervention. And so the RTI models are all tied very closely to that progression of performance of students all the way to the 11th grade year. What I will tell you is when you first give an assessment tied to those comparable numbers in NAEP and Explore, your state assessments will drop probably around 30 points. Kentucky's legacy assessment was kind of about when you do a NAEP comparison, you compare every state NAEP, proficient or above levels against the state proficient or above levels. Kentucky was kind of right in the middle. We weren't real low, we weren't real high. Our tests were kind of mediocre. They weren't rigorous, they weren't very easy. They were kind of right in the middle. So that would tell you that probably a good predictor for PARCC and Smart Balance and any state developed assessment like Pam has done in Florida, you'll probably drop about 30 points. Now, how long does it take to see movement? Every time I've been through probably 7 iterations of a new assessment, and I hated every one of them. It's kind of like social studies standards. I hated every one of those. But, you got to go through this iteration. You always drop, and then you always start moving back because teachers figure it out, kids figure it out. The first year we moved a little bit. This year we saw 8-9 percentage point gains, especially in the 4th, 5th, 6th grade. The reason being, the elementary kids, they always move first because it's all they know. They know the new standards. Teachers have gotten the new standards. They're putting them in. So the kids have the background. But if you're in middle school, you're missing gaps. You're missing a couple of years. And middle school math teachers in particular needed to really beef up their abilities with these new math standards. And there are a lot of reading changes too. High school, I was a high school principal. It just takes time. You're going to have to have kids feed through the system. I will tell you the good news on the other end. When we started this work, it was all about getting kids ready to enter college without the need for remediation. That was the definition of college ready. That's the definition NAEP uses, that they're ready to enter an academic credit-bearing course their freshman year. When we started this work, only 30% of our seniors were ready to enter college doing academic work. This past year, we had 62%. We've doubled the number of kids. That was 15,000 more kids are able to enroll freshman courses without the need for remediation, save mom and dad $15 million in the state and tuition loans. So there is a good end to this. It does work, and people will rally as long as they're engaged and involved on the front end. So thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share with you some of the experiences we've had in Idaho. And most of what we've done in Idaho, it's things that we've learned coming to events like this. So maybe you'll pick up a gem or two. And Terry's comments are right on, and I appreciate Kentucky's leadership in their early adoption of the standards. It's given other states like mine the ability to use that example of how Idaho students can benefit from the core standards. And I think it's one reason that for a very red state, Idaho has, at least till now, avoided the Common Core battle at the legislative level. Now we have a couple Idaho legislators here that I'm hoping will continue blunt that effort if it does rear its head in the Idaho legislature. But in Idaho, we decided some time ago that we would begin to define success in our schools not by how well our students are doing in school, but how well they do outside of school in the real world where they work and live. Are they going on to college and having to take remedial courses? Are they entering the workforce, and are they prepared when they get there? If not, then that is the number one criteria that determines whether our public schools are effective or not. And so we began to have discussions and focus on that. Idaho is a state that enjoys a very high school graduation rate, high 80s to 90% year after year, even with a 4-year cohort, right? So we put a high value, a high cultural value on high school graduation. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate to a go-on rate for students pursuing education after high school, because Idaho goes from one of the highest high school graduation rates in the country to one of the lowest in the percentage of students that actually go on. And those that choose to go on, half of them have to take remedial courses when they get there. Only a third of them go on to their second year, right? And so in Idaho, we end up with an adult population that has about 39% has some form of post-high school degree or certificate. Well, we know that the jobs today, 60% of them require more than a high school diploma, so it has a real economic impact on Idaho. So we recognize quality education as an economic engine, and so there's a lot of focus on that. The foundation of our efforts to improve education in Idaho is high academic standards. It does no one any good, including especially children, to have a standard that is not equal to any other state in the country and equal to any other country in the world, right? If we graduate students and they've met a standard, we give them a diploma and pat them on the back, and 3 months later their parents are saying, how is this that 3 months ago my child received a high school diploma and now you're telling me they have to take remedial courses in college? So they met the standard, but they weren't ready 3 months later, so we had to raise our standards. And then built upon that foundation are our 3 pillars: great teachers and leaders, 21st century classrooms, and transparent accountability. And what I've been asked to focus on, and what I want to share with you for a few minutes is what we've done specifically when it comes to great teachers and leaders, the evaluation process we have in place in Idaho, and where we hope to go with our focus on great teachers and leaders. The most important factor, we all know, because study after study has told us, that the most important factor is the quality of the teacher in the classroom. It's not how much money you spend, it's not the curriculum, it's not the standards, it's not the textbooks. All of those are important, right? But every study tells us that by far the most important factor is the quality of the teacher in the classroom, and Governor Bush touched on that this morning when he talked about if you have an average student that has an ineffective teacher, that average student leaves all the way down at the 3rd percentile, right? That same student who's average that has a highly effective teacher 1 year later leaves up at the top, up at the 96th percentile, right? So they're so just having an ineffective teacher for 1 year has consequences for a student that are unacceptable. And so if we know this, if we know that a student having an ineffective teacher for just 1 year has these kinds of consequences, then why would we ever leave this to chance? I've got 10 grandchildren now, right? It's the reward for letting my kids live when they were teenagers. But and I look at them, and I look at the other 300,000 children in Idaho, and I realize I can't leave it to chance that any one of them has an ineffective teacher for even 1 year. So what policies do we put in place? Idaho's blessed with great teachers, but like every profession, there are some that aren't. And so we have focused on an effort that started years ago when I first came into office, realizing that Idaho did not have a framework for teacher evaluation. So it was different from district to district and sometimes school to school. Some districts did teacher evaluations very well, others did not. Others, it would be on a Friday afternoon, somebody showing up at a teacher's class saying, hey, sign this, they're due Monday morning. That was the evaluation, right? So So it wasn't fair to teachers, and it was very inconsistent. So we spent the good part of 18 months working with educators and school board members and others across Idaho, and we developed a statewide framework for teacher evaluations. We chose the Charlotte Danielson framework. We provide training for all administrators so that they can properly evaluate teachers against that framework. Districts can choose a different framework, but they have to do a crosswalk and present it to the State Department that they have an evaluation that aligns with the Danielson model. We've been doing that for a number of years. We looked at the evaluations that were taking place, and which is probably typical to what you see, that a very small percentage of teachers in evaluations were identified as basic or below basic. The vast majority, in one region of our state, it was less than 1% of the teachers that their evaluations showed that they were basic or below, right? Everyone else was satisfactory or higher. And so we wanted to, again, bring some consistency to it and also make sure that it was rigorous. And the Charlotte Danielson model has worked very, very well for Idaho. So building upon that, then, we began to talk about how student achievement should impact a teacher's evaluation. And today in Idaho, you have the Charlotte Danielson evaluation, and then also part of the overall evaluation, 1/3 of that is student achievement. Because we are transitioning to a new statewide assessment, then currently those student achievement measures are determined at the local level. But 1/3 of a teacher's evaluation is based upon student achievement and primarily focused on growth. How much growth did those students see that 1 year that they were in that teacher's classroom? Most recently, our focus has been based upon teacher licensure. We are one of 7 or 8 NTEP states, which is an effort by the CCSSO to engage states in looking at teacher preparation programs and using 3 levers to improve teacher quality. One of those levers is program approval. The other is the licensure process in your states, and thank you. And the others are the data collecting and reporting. And so what we have done is we have changed the way that we evaluate and approve our teacher preparation programs in Idaho. And we've moved from one that just says that you do these things for teachers, now that they have to demonstrate that teachers are actually learning them through objective measures. And teachers, pre-service teachers, have to demonstrate that they've learned these and developed these skills. Let me show you, in order to receive program approval in Idaho, formally, we only required a pre-service teacher to earn a certain number of credits and then pass the praxis at a certain level. That in and of itself would qualify a teacher for an institutional recommendation, which would then lead to initial licensure in Idaho. What we have in place today is now we still have the 2 areas that we had previously, but now we also require that they must demonstrate competencies in core, foundational, and enhanced standards for teacher preparations. A pre-service teacher has to have a Danielson-based evaluation and show that they meet expected proficiencies in that evaluation. A pre-service teacher also has to develop a plan for continuing improvement, growth following graduation, so they have an individualized professional learning plan that they actually take with them to their first school that they work in, and that individual professional learning plan then drives the professional development and the mentoring that they will receive from day 1 as a brand new teacher. And then they must also have demonstrated abilities to effectively use data, integrate technology, and teach to Idaho core standards. So we've raised the bar considerably for initial licensure. And then once a teacher becomes, has initial licensure, then we are in the process of moving towards what we refer to as a residency, where for 3 years there's rigorous expectations before a teacher receives what we call a professional license. And then at that point, the system is pretty much similar to what we have today. But we've considerably raised the bar on initial licensure, And then we're working to raise the bar once teachers are in-service teachers. And so those three levers have proven to be very effective. And whether it's the program approval and our working with our institutions of higher ed and our teacher preparation programs in Idaho, working with them has been very effective in creating this work. I guess what this all comes down to is that we have to have high standards. We have to have a measurement that accurately measures those standards. And then how do you use the information that you retrieve from those evaluations and those assessments? And we believe, and what we've worked to implement, is that evaluations need to drive professional development, and they also need to have impact on student learning and improvements in student learning. Focusing again on wanting every student to have a highly effective teacher every year that they're in school and not leaving this to chance. So that's Idaho's story so far. Thank you.
Good morning. I too am glad to be here, and as you heard Governor Bush speak this morning, Florida certainly has a story to tell. I asked if I could have the entire hour and 15 minutes. I was told I couldn't, so you'll be relieved to know that. But there is an awful lot that has happened in the state of Florida in that 15 years that the A+ plan was adopted. I was thinking as Governor Bush was speaking that in that 15 years I've held 6 different positions in public education, and really 8 if you include the times that I flipped to be interim commissioner and back to being chancellor and back to being commissioner. It is a bit intimidating for me to sit here and have one of my predecessors, who was also my mentor, sitting in the audience, but I want to acknowledge John Wynn, who worked very hard and championed the A+ program. He's sitting here in the front row, amazing man. And I look to him for that leadership and that direction often. Appreciate your actually sitting here on the front row, intimidating though it may be. There are also, that I see in the audience, 4 of my State Board of Education members, and Patricia shared that it would be nice to have a board chair that just shows up and sort of does what you tell them to do. And as we're sitting here, my board chair made eye contact with me several times as several things were being said. And I know him well enough to know that that eye contact meant everything from, well, get to work, or see, I've been telling you that. Gary Chartrand back here. Florida really does have quite the story to tell. And we were about standards for many, many years, starting back in the previous century. And in 2007, we made a big transition, moving from Sunshine State standards to next generation Sunshine State standards, really as an intermediary step from our mile-wide and inch-deep standards that never allowed us to really delve in and get with students the mastery that they needed. And we moved to next generation. We more than cut our standards in half. And as you know, and as the session title tells you, you must align your assessments to the standards that are being taught. So we moved into the arena of changing the assessment and developed a new assessment in 2010 that was administered in the spring of 2011. We provided districts with item specs and sample items in October, November, and December of that year. When we changed standards that time, we changed those standards on a dime. From one year to the next, they were new standards. And we did the same with our assessments. We go through a very rigorous process when we establish cut scores for a new assessment, and I'll share that with you in just a minute, but I want to talk about the way we transitioned with our assessment this last time. And that transition was that we were going to issue school grades in the summer just as we always had. And in order to do that, we didn't have new cut scores established. So we used a process where we linked the new scores to the previous scores. And when you do that, you really keep the statewide results the same. By nature of equipercentile linking, you are really keeping the performance the same. In so doing, we were able to keep continuity of data reporting and data sharing. But in so doing, we created a great deal of confusion because we talked about the more rigorous standards, how that we had more rigorous standards, our assessment was richer, it was more rigorous, and as has already been shared, when you move to a new assessment that is more rigorous, you're going to see a drop. But because we did equipercentile linking, it looked the same, and we confused our public in doing that. Once we established cut scores, we went back and retrofitted those cut scores to the performance and shared that with the public, trying in our best effort to prepare them for what would happen next. But all they heard was that first release. To give you an example, in third grade, there were 72% of our third graders reading on grade level. 72%. That was with our equipercentile linking. Once we established cut scores, the actual performance of those students was 57% of those students were performing on grade level. But that never resonated with folks. So it was a very important lesson learned. And what happened was the State Board of Education, and if you wanted to talk with any of them after the meeting, they'll be sure to share with you what that was like, because there then became this desire to mitigate that drop in the next year. Because as I said, we'd already gone to more rigorous standards and assessments and had seen no dip in scores. And so it was unexpected when it happened a year later. And it really sort of forced the State Board into a position to provide some mitigation for that and put into place what was called the safety net that still was in existence through this past year. And they will tell you the pain of that. So what that meant was that a school couldn't drop more than one grade level. No matter the number of points they earned, they couldn't drop more than one grade level. And we're still feeling the effects of that. So our learning in that process was that in our new assessment this year, our Florida Standards Assessment that will be administered for the first time in the spring, we will wait and delay school grades until late in the fall so that we can establish the cut scores before we release school grades. And we will then eliminate all the confusion about school grades, and the grade is what the grade is. Our cut score process is one that's very, very important to us in Florida. We have, and it's similar to what's already been described to you, but we have 5 achievement levels, and we have achievement level descriptors. And there are hundreds of educators that come together for 2 days to look at the items on the assessment and compare that to the achievement level descriptors to determine what should students who fall in this achievement level be able to know. Should they get this particular question correct? They do 3 rounds of that. They make a recommendation. That recommendation then moves to what we call the reactor panel. Sounds like something in a nuclear power plant. But it's a group of stakeholders made up of higher ed, business folks, parents, and educators. Superintendents, to be specific. And they do a very similar process, and they look at the achievement levels, but they also look at things like how does this look in comparison with other assessments that these students take? They also look at that point, and that's the first point that anyone looks at. If these cut scores were applied to the performance, what would we see as percentage of students falling in each of those levels? That is an important step, but it is one of the important steps along the way. It can't be the only step. Then it is brought to me both the educator panel recommendation as well as the reactor panel recommendation. I make some decisions, and I bring that before the State Board, and the State Board of Education makes a final decision. New in that process is that it also goes over to the legislature for review before that final step of the State Board of Education making that final decision. So in this year coming up, we will go through that process in the late summer and then apply those cut scores to the performance of students to determine school grades. So Florida has a very rich history in school grades. It is the driver. I am completely convinced that having the right standards, the right assessment aligned to those standards are very, very, very important. And as Tom Luna said, the teacher is the most important factor in the factor of student achievement. I'll add to that the most important factor in teacher success is the administrator in that school as well. But in addition to that, what we have found in Florida is that the A through F grading system, and I emphasize the A through F grading system, is of utmost importance if you want to see improvement in student achievement in your state. Without a doubt, it is very, very powerful. And those things that you believe to be important for students to know and be able to do before they leave high school should be included in your accountability system. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is anecdotal and it is personal, and I apologize to my board members because they've had to hear this story before, some of them more than once. But Cornelia shared with you that I was an elementary principal and a high school principal. And I was an elementary principal when school grading came on the scene. And I really thought, he's not in the room right now, but I thought Governor Bush did not know what he was doing. I was the principal of a school that was 97% free and reduced lunch, 93% African American. And I knew that my students could not perform at the same level as the students across the county that came from affluence. And we were a critically low performing school. And the first year that grades came out, we were an F. And that was very hard to swallow. But we could have wallowed around in that sorrow of our grade. But instead, we picked ourselves up from our bootstraps. Our teachers worked very hard together. And we moved that school in 1 year from an F to a C. That was tremendous work. And that was when our school grading system only included performance of students, didn't include learning gains. It only included the percentage of students that were performing at level 3 or above. That was tremendous work, and it represents great possibilities for the students in that school that previously had not had those opportunities. I became what I term a reformed smoker and get on my soapbox whenever possible because there was power in that F. There was not power in critically low performing, but there was power in the F. And so we got together and did that very important work. The other information that I have is very quantitative in nature, and that is, as part of our high school grading formula, we added in 2010 participation in acceleration. So it includes dual enrollment, AP, IB, ACE, and industry certification. And we saw a tremendous spike in the participation in those acceleration programs. There was a component for participation and a component for performance. And so what happened was we had students in the AP program that prior to that participation being part of the formula, 230,000 students participated. And post that, there were 320,000 students. So this past year, 320,000 students in Florida's high schools participated in AP exams. And you may say, well, that's really good. You had more kids participating in AP. And while we did see an initial dip in the performance in AP, it now exceeds our highest year of AP performance. And that measure, along with many others in Florida, that Governor Bush stole from me that I was going to share with this group. We are second in the nation in AP participation. And while being second in the nation in participation, we are fifth in the nation in performance on those AP exams that those students take. We also have the highest Hispanic graduation rate in the state, in the nation, I'm sorry. And he alluded to this, but our 4th and 8th graders were we were the only state in the nation that our 4th and 8th graders narrowed the gap between white and African American students in both 4th grade, 8th grade, both reading and mathematics on the last NAEP administration. I really do believe that, and there are many more, I could go on for a long time. We have the whole list of them, of how we've moved from 48th to 6th in the nation, the great work that's happened in Florida, and I really do attribute, having lived it personally and knowing what that's like, to the A+ program, to the A through F grading system in the state of Florida. I'll say that, I said it at the beginning, it's important that you include in that A through F grading system those things that you believe to be most important. I've tried to be brief, but share with you the success in Florida and why I believe that success exists. We also, in Florida, as time went on, did not ever see a measure we didn't think was important. And so we kept adding to the school grading system because this was important. And you know the old adage, when everything is important, nothing is important. And that began to happen, and we began to dilute those things that were most important to us. So as we move forward, we had one of the, both of the legislators that carried the school grading bill this last session are here at this. I don't see them in the room. I want to give them credit, though, for the great work that they did to help us move forward in our grading system, and it will be more clear, concise. We're removing some of those things that do muddy the school grading system and make it more complicated, and focus on those things that we believe to be much more important as we move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carey.
Well, good morning. It is indeed my pleasure to be here, and I would also be remiss if I did not recognize my board chair, because this gentleman not only shows up and is always on time and always on point, but he is a tremendous supporter of me and my team and of education in the state of Mississippi. So Dr. John Kelly is here with us, so thank you. So Mississippi adopted the Common Core standards in 2010, and it was determined that that was a good place for us to start because our standards at that time had been evaluated as insufficient. In fact, Fordham came in and evaluated our math standards and referred to them as mediocre, and they evaluated our English language arts standards and referred to them as the worst in the country. So no place to go but up. So in 2011, we officially joined PARC, and at that time, the governor was Haley Barbour, and he signed an MOU to have us be a part of the PARC and have Mississippi be a part of the PARC governing board. And then when Governor Bryant was elected, he reconfirmed that, recommitted us to PARC, and so we have been one of the governing states since that time. We were started to develop our A through F accountability system in 2012. The state board at that time had convened a task force, and they wanted to look at a couple of things. One was the quality and the transparency of our high school completion index, and two, how that index was being used in our accountability system. And we had a lot of superintendents raising concerns about the legitimacy of that, because graduation rate was only being applied to the top 2 levels of the district. So in other words, if you were a star or a high-performing district, graduation rate applied to you. But if you were below that, graduation rate did not apply. So legitimate concerns. So the task force, obviously, once it started its work, said, you know what, I think we need to really be looking at a complete overhaul of the accountability system. And we knew that there was pending legislation to change us into an A through F system that met both state and federal reporting requirements. So at that time, we had two separate systems. We had a state system for accountability and a federal system for accountability, and we knew that legislation was coming to combine it into one. So we took a look at all the good work, obviously, that was being done in Florida, and reached out to our friends in Florida to see exactly what they were doing. We knew there was a tremendous deep dissatisfaction in our own state with our system's current growth component, but more importantly, the lack of transparency. We had superintendents, we had some of our stakeholders that used to just refer to it as the black box. They just didn't get how things were calculated. So, and that's important that people know that, because I think it lends the level of trust and credibility that states need. So the task force that we convened included classroom teachers, superintendents, deputy superintendents, our district test coordinators, a representative from the State Board of Ed, and leaders from our legislature. And we worked with the Foundation for Excellence in Education, which shared with us Florida's model, and we also knew that it had to be Mississippi-centric. So we also were looking to how can we incorporate models, parts of that model into our own, and then how can we make it our own as well. It took about 18 months for the whole process to go through, with very public, a lot of public forums, a lot of input from the public. And one of the things that with the feedback that we got was that people were feeling that this process was substantially more transparent than the one that they'd gone through in 2007 and 2008. But interestingly, some of the districts started pushing back on two of the components that were being proposed. One was the target to test at least 95% of their students, and the other was the target that 50% of the lowest performing students out of the lowest 25% had to meet growth. So some districts felt that they were being punished if they did not meet both of these targets. So there was a lot of listening and a lot of feedback taken, and so we agreed on one thing. I don't know that we agreed. We retained one thing, and the one thing was that it was an automatic trigger which lowered a grade if a school did not test at least 95% of its eligible students. But we removed the automatic trigger if the 50% of the lowest performing of the 25% of that bottom did not meet growth. And the reason we did that, the lowest 25% in our model are in our model in a lot of different places. And so the emphasis that we were placing was on looking at the lowest 25%. And so we felt with all of that being kind of embedded throughout, we felt comfortable with that. It was right after that that we formed a technical advisory committee to establish all the procedural and statistical components of the system, and Dr. Hovnitz was kind enough to be on our TAC and still remains on our TAC. And that's a fabulous group of people who incredibly brilliant that can get into a room. I've met with the TAC, and it's just interesting to see when you've got that level of knowledge that's looking at this system, the more credibility I think that lends to the system itself. So our state board approved Mississippi's revised accountability system, and for the first time this year, 2013-14, actually this past year, it was put into place. So the three key differences from the last were obviously the emphasis on growth and the lowest performing 25%. And the previous system had used a predictive model for calculating growth, and now students meet growth if their scores improve one proficiency level or if they improve within a proficiency level in a sufficient manner. The other thing that we looked at was this completion index for high schools, because in the last system, partial credit was being given for GED students and students who earned other types of non-traditional diplomas, and we determined that these completers were not going to be considered in our new model, and per state statute they are not considered in our new model, and they do not receive then any accountability points for those. So 2013-14 was a great transitional year for us. It also happened to be my first year as state superintendent, so it was a very interesting and interesting year. And so this was also the first time that we were expecting all of our districts to fully implement our Common Core state standards. We have now started referring to them as our Mississippi College and Career Ready standards. We have not changed one standard, but we did rename them. And this was also the last year that our students were given the old set of assessments. And the old set of assessments were not in any way, shape, or form aligned to the Common Core. So we knew that going in, and so we reached out to the Department of Ed in DC and said, look, is there a way that you could give us a waiver? A lot of superintendents were nervous, a lot of principals were nervous. You're going to be testing us on we've been implementing Common Core, and now you're assessing us on something that's not close to that. And so we got a waiver for this year. And so the waiver was that if whatever your score was in 14, if it was higher, a grade higher, then you got to keep that score. But if the grade dropped, you got to keep the higher of the two scores between 13 and 14. However, it was important to me that both scores be published. Because if you're talking about transparency, then I think parents deserve to know this was if we hadn't had the waiver, here's how the district would have scored. But now with the waiver, this is the grade that they're getting. So this was good news. So this school year, this will be the first time that our students in grades 3 through 8 in algebra and English will be tested on the PARC assessments. And we have been very heavily involved in their development. We've had a lot of our educators involved in the development of the items. We were big test in terms of the field testing administration that we did this past year. We had over 80,000 of our students participate, so we got a lot of feedback on that. And we will be using the cut scores that PARC sets in the fall. We too expect to see a drop, and we're starting that communication right now so that our parents aren't surprised by that. And so we've been talking about what kind of a communication plan do we need to ensure that when the scores arrive, the parents aren't going to be surprised when the scores drop, and districts aren't going to be surprised. We have contracted with Pearson to deliver the assessments. We did run into a huge glitch. I'll use that term nicely. We only were able to get this contract for 1 year. I don't know how much you're familiar with PARC, but PARC allowed each of the various states to handle a part of its assessment, and New Mexico ran the RFP, as you know, for the assessment, just like Rhode Island is doing it for the contract management. So we had been working with the Personal Services Contract Board all along, thinking that this was going to go through, and literally at the 13th hour, they told us that they were going to prohibit us from seeking the approval of this. So we, in Mississippi, was a good thing. We had a piece of legislation that said, the law said, you can issue an emergency contract that does not need to be approved by the Personal Services Review Board. And so that was the only option we had. So we are now and the other part of the law says it can be for 1 year only. So you can imagine the angst in the state right now, because we administered the old assessment last year. We're administering PARC this year. We have to put out a brand new RFP for another assessment. So you've got a state that now technically could have 3 different assessments in 3 different years. And so to say that the anxiety level on our teachers and our principals and our superintendents and our board's part are a little high is an understatement. So that RFP will come out in early 2015, and we'll have to follow that process then to see what test gets administered following 2015. So it's so critical to me that we have a consistent assessment. You've got teachers that are out there working so hard, implementing the state standards, implementing this higher level of rigor in the classroom. Our students are working hard to excel. And for me to finally have an assessment that is aligned to what we've been teaching is so critical. And so that is something that we're looking forward to. We're delighted with our A through F system, and I really want to recognize not only the foundation for the support that you provided the state, thank you so much, but I also want to recognize Senator Tollison. He's here from our legislature. He's been a champion of this system in the Senate, and I want to thank him for his continued support and his level of involvement. Just as I've been blessed with a board chair that always reads all of his materials and comes to all board meetings prepared, I'm blessed with a senator that every time you meet with him in his education committee, he too has done all of his homework and is a real champion for education in Mississippi. So thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Thank you all very much. And now it's time for questions from the audience. We have 2 mics here. If you want to take a shot at one of these 4 people and ask the question.
Take a shot?
Metaphorically. What question didn't they answer that's on your mind? What's the challenge out there for you that you've been thinking about? Okay, we have a person coming. Please identify yourself.
Good morning to my colleagues. I'm Mike Moderator, the newly appointed state superintendent in West Virginia, on the job 2 months. And we are in the process of doing a very robust reform movement, and we're very proud of the work that's occurring. We're at the initial stages of our A to F implementation, and I know we have a larger session later this afternoon. But those of you who've gone through that, I appreciate your confidence, and I'm in that same level of confidence regarding that being a major mover in terms of driving the educational reform. What advice would you give to those at the early stage of the implementation from your experience? And I hope to dig deeper into that this afternoon as well. Thank you.
One of the things, I'd have lots of advice, but probably one of the best pieces of advice that I think would have been helpful initially, and John Wynn could speak to this as well, but I think staying strong in spite of the storm, and lots and lots and lots of communication about what this is going to mean for students in West Virginia.
Okay. Anyone else?
In Idaho, we have a 5-star system, so it's still 5 different levels, right? And what I found is that the 4- and 5-star schools love it. The 1- and 2-star schools, not so much. Every school wants you to measure what they do well and not put as much weight on things that they struggle in, right? So I think you're going to have that regardless of the system that you choose. But the advice I would definitely give anyone that's pursuing this is to make sure that there are multiple measures and that you're measuring the right things and putting the right weight on them, because you will see the reaction that these folks have mentioned. We saw the same thing in Idaho when we put as one of our measures, one of our multiple measures in high school, students taking dual credit AP. It's gone through the roof, the number of students taking dual credit in AP. So make sure that you're measuring the right things. And what I think you would hear from Terry, that I've learned from him, is that, and those right things have to be better preparing students for a career after high school, college career. So that would be my, my experience.
Anything, Terry? Okay.
No,
All right.
the only thing I would add to that, Mike, is really decide what's important for the children in West Virginia, because I think knowing for us it continues to be huge for me to make sure that we are looking at the bottom 25%, because Mississippi's scores, as you well know, are so low. And so for me, we've got to focus on those children, but there's also, which I didn't mention, there's also an acceleration component in our model that gives schools and districts credit for AP, dual credit, dual enrollment, IB, whatever that advanced is. So it needs to be a balance of both, because the one thing that I don't want people to perceive is that we are setting a ceiling, and we're not. We're setting a floor and wanting to move from the floor up, not a ceiling down.
All right, thanks. Question?
Thank you, Ed Emery from Missouri. And I confess I'm not a big fan of uniformity of one size fits all. So either it's history or it's philosophy. But I frequently hear the term rigor or rigorous. If we were to ask everyone in the audience, would we get the same definition of rigor? And how do we apply that if not?
So Terry, why don't you take a shot at that?
Thank you so much for that opportunity, Cornelia. I just keep it pretty simple. Whatever, we got agreement from all of our universities, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, as to what the level of performance on a common admissions test, ACT, would be to enter credit-bearing courses. All right? And then you go and you work side by side, high school teachers with professors who teach entry-level courses, to agree upon what does student performance look like. Now, is that rigor? I don't know. We could debate rigor till the cows come home, in Mississippi. But rigor means something practical to kids and parents and professors of entry-level courses. Now, the big work, I think even more important, is what is rigor for entry into career. What are the workplace skills that is an entry-level position in a career that could lead to a living wage? So You know, I guess that's why I probably never will make it in higher ed. I'm just too practical and just want to focus on, you know, something I can put my hands on.
Pam?
If I could add to that a little bit, I think there's rigor around a few different things. There's rigor around the standards, and then there's rigor around the way you ask those questions, and then there's rigor around the accountability system. And you're right, everyone's definition is going to be different of what does rigor look like. I think there are some examples that could be given. One is that being able to multiply multi-digit numbers together. That's one level of a standard, and you can think of the way to ask that question. But a more rigorous way of looking at that would be for students to apply the multiplication algorithm, understanding base 10 and using base 10 in the multiplication of multi-digit numbers. And that takes a much more deep understanding of mathematics and indicates that not only solving a problem of math, but also being able to solve problems as students move forward, being able to solve it on their own and think critically. And that's a demonstration of a more rigorous standard as well as a more rigorous way to ask that question. With regard to rigor with the grading system, I think that you've got to keep your eye on that. And that's another thing. And so, Mike, that's something that I would tell you as well. Don't think that you've established a grading system and you're done. I think it's important to continue to review that and make sure that you are making that A and B that Tom talked about, your top two levels, really means something. And that when anyone in the public looks at that, they know what that A or B means because it does represent rigor. And it does represent that the students in that school are achieving at the level so that when they do leave the system, they are career and college ready. And if I may use microphone privilege for just one moment, I am told through the power of technology that Representative Janet Adkins, where is she? There she is. She was hiding. See, you were hiding. Just as Carey thanked her senator, I have to tell you that Janet Adkins did a marvelous job of carrying our changes to our school accountability bill in the House. And she was amazing. We were in the gallery that day when it was on the floor. And as you can imagine, there were folks in the room that were challenging her and asking some very difficult questions. Both people who were wanting to know and people who were trying to shoot holes in school grading, and she was amazing. It could have been anyone in our assessment office that was answering those questions. She knew it so well. I appreciate the work that she did and her willingness to hold folks accountable in Florida. Thanks.
And Tom Luna, response?
Yeah, real quick, when we talk about rigor, I think everyone has a different, maybe specific definition, but I think we would all agree it means students learning at higher and higher levels. What we have found, what I have found, is that once students see relevance in what they're learning, rigor will take care of itself. Because once they see relevance, they want more and more of it at higher and higher levels. So focusing on relevance, where students see this is what I need to know in order to get to where I want to go. If they don't see relevance, I don't think you'll ever get the rigor that we need or want. So we've focused far more, and I think we need to focus far more on students seeing relevance to what they're learning, and then rigor takes care of itself.
All right, let's go to this side of this microphone. We'll take a question, then come back to this side.
Thank you. Dwayne Quam from Minnesota. The powers that be removed all cut scores and any gauges that you had to hit to graduate. And I'm hoping you can give some suggestions other than, just remedial, percentage increase of people needing remedial courses. What can we look at to gauge the impact, since we no longer can judge, how many students make or pass the cut scores?
Okay, Terry.
I think what's critical with every state, or at least 46 states, have a statewide longitudinal data system. And what we've started doing is publishing reports. Okay, student graduates or college career ready. What happens next? That's not enough. We need to look at first-year persistence, Do the kids persist from first year to second year post-secondary? What's the GPA first year, second year? What is the number of credit hours? Because if they're not getting at least 15 credit hours a semester, they're not going to be successful. And then we look at things like, what are kids making once they get into the workforce? For instance, in Kentucky, if you're a high school graduate and that's it, you stop there, your average salary for the first 3 years upon leaving high school is around $10,000. Now, they will be living in your basement, I guarantee you. So I think those are the kind of measures, real down-to-earth, practical measures that kids and parents can understand and make it relevant to their future. If I could do away with all reporting on assessments, those are just leading indicators. They're one measure. What's really important is how successful they are as young adults.
All right, this side of the room.
Captain Ed Davidson and the school board in the Florida Keys. I appreciate all this candid discussion about the challenges and difficulties, the supervisory level people. None of this works without dedicated teachers in the classroom who feel that their extraordinary efforts in most of our schools are appreciated. With all the glitches at the administrative levels and different standards from year to year, how do you adjust your teacher evaluation system to be sure that the teachers, our product delivery people, aren't unduly penalized by difficulties at the administrative level over which they have no control? In Florida, for instance, 50% of our value-added model, as we like to call it, is based on scores, basically. How do you ensure that during these difficult transitions, the teachers aren't unduly penalized because of these challenges at those levels?
Tom?
And I think I mentioned in my presentation that as we've transitioned to these higher standards and new assessment, which doesn't happen every year, you know, that we haven't changed our standards numerous times, and this is the second time, the first time we changed our assessment, right? So this isn't something that happens regularly and it's disruptive like it is. But during this transition, the portion of the teacher evaluation, which is 1/3, that it focuses on student achievement, we are, the local districts are choosing their measures. So it brings it down to a local level and allows them to identify those areas that they are comfortable with, but a teacher's evaluation, 1/3 of it will still be based on student achievement.
Pam, I'm going to cut you off because we only have 5 minutes left, and I'd like to get these two last questions. And if you want to talk to others after, you can come up. Okay, from this side.
Eileen Weiser, State Board of Education in Michigan. I had the honor of serving with both Tom and Terry under Cornelia's leadership at the National Assessment Governing Board. I have a change-up question. As you work to solidify new standards and more rigorous assessments in your states, Michigan, like Kentucky, was a lead state for next-gen science standards. And my concern has always been, how much can we throw at our teachers and our students in any one small chunk of time and be successful? What are states doing who, like us, have desperate needs for new science standards, about adoption or about developing their own?
Pam or Terry, you want to try that?
Well,
Or
I'll
Carey.
just say,
Okay.
well, I'll say that we're just now looking at that. We have not gone in and adopted science standards, but I've just had a conversation with a person from our curriculum office that says we're going to start looking at that. I guess as a former principal and teacher, my view has always been to try to keep looking through the lens of a third grade teacher is what I'm going to say. So if I'm a third grade teacher, how much can I handle at any one time? How much can I handle in terms of new content? How much can I handle in terms of professional development? Like, how much is too much? And so part of what I just announced actually is I'm going to form a teacher's advisory committee, because I think it's important for me to hear from boots on the ground about that, because we can sit at the State Department and think, oh, they can do this and they can do that, but it's important to know what they're dealing with on a daily basis, and to hear from what's happening. My Superintendent's Advisory Council that I formed this year has been invaluable to me, because they're the ones that are making it happen out there with their principals and principals with teachers. So I think it's important for us to always remember that, and then even if it's something that we've got to grandfather in, if you will, over a period of time, because we can't afford to lose the most important person that we have, and that's who stands in front of the classroom. So for me, it's ensuring that I'm not pushing too much out too quickly.
Anyone else? All right, let's go to the questioner.
Hi, Alana Rubel, Idaho House of Representatives. I'm curious as to whether any of you have encountered any tension between the ideals of the testing and accountability framework and the choice idea. In particular, I'm envisioning a scenario where public education dollars might be directed toward homeschooling or online learning, charter schools, vocational schools, private schools, et cetera, and whether any of you have experience in applying this kind of a testing framework in those scenarios, because I know certainly in our state there's been great hostility traditionally by homeschoolers and other groups to, having to respond to those kind of standardized tests, if you will, or any sort of other criteria. So I'm wondering if any of you have applied that kind of a uniform testing framework outside of a traditional public school setting, and if so, how you've done it, or if you envision challenges in that area.
Anyone?
I'll just quickly address that in Florida, we have over 500 charter schools, and our charter schools are public schools, and they are given the same assessments that students in traditional public schools are as well. We are not doing that same standardized testing in the private arena.
Do you for homeschoolers? No?
They may choose to. They may choose to come in. And actually our private school students, because we have end-of-course assessments that earn high school credit, they can also have the opportunity to come and take those so that if they're going to transition into a public high school, they have the credit that they need.
Okay.
I'll just
Good.
say
Tom.
that in similar, and Representative, thanks for being here from the great state of Idaho, that we offer homeschoolers and students that attend private schools the choice to take the assessments. But I do, personally, I support the Indiana approach. They have a voucher system, but if students take that voucher and go to a private school, if they accept one voucher, then the whole school has to participate in the statewide assessments. And I support that. So if they choose to participate in receiving state dollars, then I think they should have to participate in the statewide assessments and the same accountability system. That's, Tony Bennett tells me that's what Indiana's doing today, and rather successfully. So.
Okay. Thank you. Christy Hovance is coming back to the podium.
So I just want to thank you so much for attending our session this morning, and would like to thank Dr. Orr and our panelists.